Hey y'all, girl, Dr. J, and I would like to welcome you back to or welcome you to my YouTube channel where you can let it flow with Dr. J. Before we jump into the message, I would like to prepare you for what you're about to hear. This message may step on your toes and make you say, ouch. But what you must understand about me and this channel is God didn't call me to only share words of encouragement and motivation for your journey, but He also called me to be who I am as an educator and to teach you, but to also keep it real. And sometimes in keeping it real, it'll hurt your feelings and expose some of the things that need to change in your life, especially in this type of context. But that's okay. That's necessary for your journey. So buckle up, loves, and come along for the ride. The title of this message is The Scenic Route. When I did some digging after receiving this title from God, I found that the scenic route is viewed as a route that is not the fastest, but it has beautiful scenery. It's a route that is designated to be a longer way than usual and one that is a specially designated road that travels through an area of natural or cultural beauty. It is also considered a way that takes you on a trip down any other road except the interstate. It's considered a deliberately slow route. But then, as I continue in my research, God brought me to Exodus chapter 13, verses 17 through 18. In these verses, it basically says that after Pharaoh finally let God's people go, God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country, though it was actually a shorter route. God led the Israelites around the desert road toward the Red Sea, and they went up out of Egypt ready for battle. You see, God knew going through the Philistine country was the quickest or the fastest route that would have got his people to where he needed them to be in a shorter time. But he also knew who the Philistines were and what they were capable of, just like he knew who the Israelites were. God knew that if his people went the direct route, they would face war and they would change their minds and go back to Egypt or back to the devil they knew instead of moving forward in a direction that God desired for them to go. You see, God knew the Israelites were not built for a journey through the Philistine country, and they would not have been able to handle transitioning from being in bondage in Egypt to being ready for battle with a group that was mean, tough, and prepared to fight. He knew that they would have been fearful and intimidated by what they saw, and they had not built up the strength, the confidence, and the faith to make it through this territory. So God had to do something different and take them on the scenic route, the long route, the route that took them around the desert, but the route that would still get them where he needed them to be. Often, this is what God does in our lives. He takes us on a scenic route, the deliberately slow route to get us where he needs us to be. He takes us down the road less traveled because it is necessary. It is a part of our process and our journey. He knows that taking the longer route will make us stronger and it will give us time to develop, to mature, and it will allow us to experience God in a different way because He's going to work in us to eventually work through us. God knows us inside and out, and He knows that if He were to put us on the interstate or on the quickest route to get us to our blessing or to the next level in our lives, we would not be prepared for what we would receive. God knows us. Just like he knew the Israelites and all that they had been through. He knew that they were broken, tired, and defeated in spirit and mindset, and they were not in a space to handle what they would be up against if they had to deal with the Philistines. He knew the first sign of adversity would have taken his people out because they were not equipped or prepared to handle more pain or hurt or another group of people or groups that would just like keep them in a space of despair and hopelessness. God knew that taking them the scenic route would be the best route, although it would take them out of their way. But God had a plan and a purpose for his people. And he did not need them to see war or to experience the same level of hurt and pain that they had experienced for so long. He needed to put them in a space where they would trust him and they would be shielded from certain things. This is what God does for us. He places us on a path that sometimes feels long, daunting and tedious in nature. He puts us on a path that sometimes feels weird and uncomfortable, and it doesn't make sense to us. He puts us on a path that seems like we will never get to where He desires for us to be, and one that can make us feel like, Lord, if I don't get there soon, I'm going to give up. I'm going to throw in the towel and I'm going to go back to what's familiar and what feels good. I'm going to go back to the path that I know. But what we must realize is God is intentional and strategic. He is a God who is in control and who knows exactly what He is doing. He is a God who has every hair on our head numbered and every step ordered. He is a God who is the author of our story and He knows all that He has in store for our lives. A God who sees not only what we're in currently, but who also sees further down the line, and He knows how to shield and protect us from things and people who are not in alignment with the plan He has for our lives. You see, the same God who knew what the Israelites would see and experience would cause them to abort the mission and make the decision to go backwards instead of forward is the same God who knows that we would do the same thing in our lives. He knows the situations that we could get ourselves into, so He has to step in and to take us a different and sometimes longer route. And if you're still not getting the point that God is trying to make, let me give it to you like this. God knows that if He were to give us everything we ask for when we ask for it, we would fumble it. Like a football player with butter fingers, we would fumble the blessing. And He knows this because He knows us and because He sees our present and our future. He knows that sometimes we need to wait, we need to grow, and to develop a deeper faith and to be cleaned up inside before we are ready for the blessing. He knows that there are times when we must heal before we can receive a blessing. He knows that there are things that we must discard of to experience something new and something greater. He knows that we must be delivered from some things before we can receive all that He has in store for our lives. And if you still don't get it, turn your volume up and lean in. You may be saying, I have been praying for a husband or a wife for 10 years, and God still hasn't blessed me with a spouse yet. But God knew that if He would have given you that good man or woman you were praying about 10 years ago, when you initially started praying for them, you would have fumbled it. God heard your prayers and all that you were asking for in a spouse. But He also knew that because of who you were and the mess that you were in, you were not ready for that good thing. He knew that if He had answered that prayer, you would have messed it up because you weren't ready for that type of blessing. You were still walking around unhealed, selfish, hurt, and with a jacked up attitude that would have caused more problems than good in your life and your marriage. God knew that what would have seemed like a blessing to you in the beginning would have ultimately felt like a nightmare because you weren't ready or prepared to be somebody's spouse. Or it could have been a situation where you had your eyes set on someone and you were praying, God, please let him or her be my wife or husband. God, please let us get married. Please let us have children and spend the rest of our lives together. But while you were praying for them, God already knew that that person would fumble you. He knew that you had a good heart and you would have done the world and all for them, but He also knew that they would have used you up, dropped you, and left you in a sea of misery and despair. He knew that if He had answered your prayers for that specific person, your prayers would have shifted from, Lord, please bless me with this person, to, Lord, please help me get rid of this fool. God knew that this person would have had you down so bad that you would not have been able to pick yourself up. God knew. He saw them. He saw you. And He knew that that was a prayer that did not need to be answered. You see, you may have been praying for a specific job, and all of a sudden you face rejection. But that rejection was God's protection because He knew that if you would have gotten that job and walked into that space, you would have caught a case. He knew that it was something in that space that you didn't need to be a part of, or someone in that space that you did not need to be connected to or to cross paths with. God knew that that job was a trap that you didn't need to walk into. He knew that the enemy was waiting on the other side, ready to take you out. He knew that you were not prepared for that space, or that space was not prepared for someone like you. God knew, so he had to close that door. God knew that if you relocated to that area that you wanted to live in, you would have been in some mess. You would have faced some hardship. You would have been miserable trying to pack up your grip to go back where you came from. He knew that if he would have allowed everything to work in your favor for that particular place, you would have walked into something you weren't ready for, and you would have been begging God to please help you get out of it. God knew that wasn't the place for you to thrive and to grow. So he had to close that door. You see, one thing about God is he thinks about everything we haven't thought about, and he sees everything we don't see on the road ahead. He knows that there are some prayers that should not be answered at all, and he knows that there are some prayers that should not be answered in a certain season of our lives. He knows that there are some things that we would mishandle because we have not built up the strength, the faith, and the courage to handle them. He also knows our past. He knows the pain, the heartache, the disappointments, and the mess that we have had to go through. He knows that some of us are in a space where we can't take any more pain or heartache. He knows that we can't take any more disappointment. He knows that we cannot take another person walking out on us or leaving us used and abused, battered, and scarred. He knows that we have been through enough. And if we walk into another situation, especially one that is out of alignment with his will for our lives and the things that he has for us, and it doesn't work out, it may destroy us. He knows that if one more person fumbles us or mishandles us, it's going to be something. It's going to be some furniture, as I like to say, some furniture moving, some sleeves pulled up, some hair tied up, some earrings taken off, and some squaring up that's going to happen because we're tired. We're tired of being hurt. We're tired of being mistreated. We're tired of folks messing with us or coming over to disturb our peace, especially when we're not looking for them or messing with anybody else. The other piece is God knows that sometimes we need to be in isolation because there's some stuff that we need to get rid of. There's some stuff that we're still carrying that's distracting us from his purpose and his will for our lives. And he knows that we're in spaces that when we're comfortable and when we are in familiar places, we don't always see those distractions. We don't see the enemy plotting on us. We don't see the trap that they're setting for us. We don't always see that they're up the road waiting for us, waiting to knock us off track, waiting to square up with us so we cannot make it to our destiny. And this is why God knows that sometimes he must take us a different route because he knows that there are some things and some people on that direct route that will prevent us from realizing our purpose and confidently walking in it. There are some situations that if we encounter them, we will retreat and go back to the place where God is calling us to move away from. He knows that while the direct route may be faster, sometimes we need the scenic route to experience Him and ourselves on a deeper and more intimate level. He knows that if He requires us to wait and to take the long road, we will become unrecognizable to our enemies. We were shift from being the one who the enemy knew could easily be defeated to the one who has built up the strength, the endurance, the faith, and the spiritual muscles, and someone who the enemy doesn't want to mess with because they see the oil on you. They smell God all over you. They see God's light shining in you and on you. They see you now approach situations with your full armor of God on and a mindset of, I wish a demon would, or I wish the enemy would run up on me. They see that you are now fully recognizing who you are and who God is in your life. And they know it will require extra work, extra scheming, and different tactics to take you out. They see that you are not still caught up in your mess or your past mistakes, and you are keeping a watchful eye so you don't get distracted by the foolishness, especially the same foolishness that you dealt with in your past. They see that you have transitioned from being unhealthy, unhealed, and broken to someone who is now healed, happy, healthy, and whole, and you are not about to fumble the blessings that God has in store for your life. This is why we must see beauty in the scenic route. There's change and transformation that takes place on this route. There's protection and shielding that happens on this route. There's a building up of strength, faith, courage, and endurance on this route. There's growth and development that happens on this route. There's a new level of intimacy for yourself, a new level of intimacy with God that happens on this route. There's enrichment and a different level of beauty that happens on this route. There are some things that God needs us to experience, and the only way that we can experience them is by taking this route. But trust that while this route may seem hard, overwhelming, uncomfortable, and unfair at times, you got to trust your process. And you have to know that if God makes you wait, and if He takes you on a scenic or a longer route, there's purpose in what He's doing. So embrace that journey and that transformation. Embrace all that God is asking you to endure and all that He's taking you through on that journey in that wilderness season, and allow Him to move and to work in your life and to make you a new creature in Him. All right, y'all. I hope this message blesses you and meets you at your point of need. I've dropped a few scriptures in the description. And as always, like, share, subscribe, and make sure you comment. Peace and love. It's your girl, Dr. J.